Welcome, everyone. Today, November 19th, is International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day, which is also known as Survivor Day. This annual event started in 1999 when it was designated by the US Congress as a day on which those affected by suicide can join together for healing and support. Many people around the world gather together for in-person events in their local communities where they can meet other people who've lost a loved one to suicide, gain some understanding of what we know about suicide based on scientific research, and see how other people have set themselves on a path toward healing. I'm Brett Ween. I'm the Director of Writing and Entertainment Outreach for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I'm your moderator today for this virtual event, and I want to let you know that I'm a survivor of suicide loss myself. I lost my mom in 2011 after watching her struggle most of my life. So it really is an honor for me, not just to have worked for AFSP for the last almost 7 years, but especially to host the year's Survivor Day live. It feels very special to me. And one thing I think is really special about International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day in general is that, people who show up to these live events or virtual events have lost someone recently, but there are other people who've lost loved ones many years in the past, and they've healed. And what I mean by that is that they've not forgotten their loved one. That loss will always be a part of them, but they've gotten past that intense grief and they've reconnected with life themselves. And they use Survivor Day as an annual moment of recognition and to touch base with their feelings. And I think they also model for newer survivors of suicide loss how you can find a way forward. That's what's special about it to me, and I think that's what today is all about. So before we get going, in case you're not familiar with AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is America's leading suicide prevention organization with local chapters in all 50 states. We're the largest private funder of suicide prevention research, which helps us understand more about this leading cause of death and can help us save lives. We have education programs, we have support for those who've been affected by suicide, and we lead advocacy efforts for smart mental health and suicide prevention legislation. We also have the Out of the Darkness walks all across the country where people can connect with others and spread awareness. We're going to start today's program by watching a special AFSP produced film called Pathways to Healing, Hope After Suicide Loss. It's a short documentary that follows the family and friends of a young adult who died by suicide, and it explores how that community of people reacted to that loss, both individually and together. When we come back in just a few minutes after that film, I'll be joined by 3 panelists who have each lost a loved one to suicide. Jen Hoy, who lost her brother Teddy, Phil Tyler, who lost his son Devin, Bridget Townsend, who lost her nephew Spencer. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion. I want to thank you so much for being here today with us. So without further ado, let's watch Pathways to Healing, Hope After Suicide Loss. I'll see you back here for our discussion in just a few minutes.
Runners set.
My son Chris was the most handsome, intelligent young man.
Soft-spoken, but funny.
Funny.
Sarcastic.
Yeah,
He cared about, secretly nice.
An amazing brother and friend to me. He had a really big heart.
Hell of a teammate, hell of a friend. I just think of him next to me and helping me through it. Out there enjoying the sun and the trails.
He was my brother, and it was really hard to lose that.
My name's Brenda Taddeo. I lost a son, my youngest son, to suicide almost 6 years ago.
For me, my friendship, like we were inseparable for, 22 years of our lives, playing outside every single day in the summer. We were at the same schools. We were almost twins, I felt.
I was the bossy older sister, so, I said, we're gonna be friends too. I'm gonna make you do everything with me. I would call him and say, hey, I wanna do this and I'm not going by myself, so. And he would say, okay, that's fine, I guess.
Chris was pretty introverted and quiet. And sometimes that bothered him. That was something that bothered him. He didn't feel as social as he would like to be.
And I told him when he got into 7th grade, you got to find some kind of team or sport or something to do, like after school. And he chose running.
When Chris started running, he was sort of a middle-of-the-road runner. And then he went to a couple summer camps throughout high school, and we noticed by his senior year, he had really just taken off.
He was friends with people on his running teams. And, after college, they all sort of trickled away and moved out of town, moved out of state. So he didn't really have anybody anymore.
Chris, I think, struggled a lot with his transition once he graduated from college. He had these expectations of himself. There was just something in him that he became more and more discouraged. The first question that I had, and I said out loud to my dad, why? And he said, I don't know. Especially I had just talked to him, and I felt like, I just talked to him. How could this have happened?
That day of his death runs through my head every day, too. And I have to try to set it aside and put it out of my mind. But we miss him so much. I just miss him and think about him every day.
Sometimes, some people, the first year can be tough because you're just, to some degree, you're in shock. I think that second year, you start to realize he's not back. He's not going to be back.
I felt like that can't be right. I can't, I went through like a period of denial that night where it's like, no, like they've got it wrong. They're confused. There's still a chance. And, like that week after, I went back to work the next week and I just dove back into work a little bit. And I think I put off some of the, serious confronting of what happened.
It sort of felt like, he's away at school, he's away at college, and, he'll be coming back someday. Well, eventually I learned that he's never coming back.
All of these questions kind of, how sad was he? Had he been sad his whole life, or just after a transition back home after college? I felt like there was like a never-ending stream of all these questions that we were left with. For whatever reason, he was scared to tell somebody, to tell us, to tell even a doctor that he felt like that.
We didn't understand depression, that how can depression be that severe? But it can be debilitating.
I mean, I think there's always a period of time where you feel guilty, you know, that I didn't do something. I could have done something.
You can't go there all the time. You know, you just can't. You know, if you learn more about mental health, that you can be better prepared. So I can maybe help somebody else.
I loved him with everything I had, and that was all I could do for him.
I think the hardest part about the marriage after the death of a child is no two people grieve the same way. You know, you might be in a stage where you cry a lot and the other person is not. So if you understand that, then you can help get through it.
The days after, I kept on closing the bedroom door. And I think my husband wanted the door open to see his room. But then I realized this is where we raised our kids, and played in the backyard and played with each other and their toys. That house was their home. And I thought to myself, I have a lot more good memories being in that home than the one traumatic, devastating, bad memory. So I started coming to church just a few months after he died. I saw a new light and a new hope. I joined a Compassionate Friends group, and this is for parents that have lost children.
I know Brenda will internalize more than I do. Sometimes you say things at the meetings, you open up, and I find, she's feeling this. It's okay to have those feelings. They're natural feelings. There's nothing wrong with them.
My first time I walked in, I was just amazed that there was so many other parents that had felt like me and had gone through losing a child. It was just so hard to believe, but they knew how I felt.
We were fortunate that we had support. We had family, we had friends. Those kind of things impacted our lives.
It's always going to hurt. It's always going to, be a part of me that's not there. But I think over time, you learn to rely on other people a little bit better.
I had really great friends who were willing to talk to me when I needed to talk. They were willing to listen. They weren't scared to talk about Chris. They weren't scared to say his name. They weren't scared to say, I went for a run today and I thought about Chris the whole time. We would have wanted Chris to seek mental health treatment, to see a doctor. So how could we not do that for ourselves? My therapist let me talk freely about Chris, about what was bothering me. And I said, there are sometimes I will see something in Wegmans and I just want to cry. And he said, you know what? Why don't you? But it seemed like there would always be some sign from him to keep going or to get back up the next morning and do it all again.
At the time that Chris died, I weighed as much as I ever did. One of the local road races that they have a 5K and a 10K, so they decided to name the 5K after Chris. And so when that happened, I said, I'd really like to do that race.
The first 5K race was dedicated to Chris Taddeo. I just couldn't believe the overwhelming numbers. People that loved him and looked up to him and considered him a friend.
I can see, I think, more now how much you can touch somebody's life just because people have touched my life by helping me.
I'm not afraid to talk to people about their feelings. Like if I see somebody who I think is struggling, I go up to them and I ask point blank, like, are you okay? You know, like I care about you. If something's going on, like let's talk about it.
But reading and understanding myself and finding how other people got through it helped me get through it.
I just wish overall that we were all more open talking about mental health in general and loss too.
I think I just notice how people are more, like if someone is struggling, I'm just a little more like in tune to like how he's feeling now because of Chris.
Having like a network of people who all like knew him and just kind of be there for each other has been super helpful.
You can give meaning to your life, meaning to your child's life. If I'm helping other people, that makes me feel better.
I remember feeling hopeful doing his first race. I'm at that place now where I just want to create this culture where it's okay to say I'm struggling. And I am very hopeful that more people are going to be helped, just everybody together. It just makes my heart feel full and happy. It's just amazing.
Okay, we're back. And I hope that film gave you some helpful context for what we're going to be discussing here today. I want to start out by going around the room and just briefly having each of our panelists introduce themselves and share a little about their loss experience, how long ago it was, how they're doing today, and so forth. So why don't we start with Jen?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Jen Hoy. I lost my brother Teddy to suicide in 2017. He was 41 years old. You know, in the first 3 years after my brother passed away, I didn't really do a lot of healing. It wasn't until about close to his third anniversary when the global pandemic sent everyone home for a time that I found that I needed an escape. I needed to clear my head and find a place where I could think by myself. So I started going for walks. During that time, I would always talk to my brother. And it started out, I was just so angry at everyone and everything, and especially at my brother. But I noticed over time, I started to feel better, and our conversations changed. My brother Teddy was a thoughtful and kind and gentle person who would do anything for anyone. And I was inspired by that, like giving nature, to start healing miles, which are remembrance walks and runs for in honor of others who have died by suicide. Since September 2020, I've walked and ran for hundreds of men, women, and children around the globe. And that's how I became involved with AFSP. During the marathon in a month, fundraising challenge. And during that time, because I was already walking a marathon, and every couple of days I pledged to walk 300 miles in memory of my brother Teddy and others lost to suicide. And I was really inspired by not just the outpouring of love and support of my friends and family, but of the greater AFSP community. Many of the people that I met during that marathon in a month have become incredibly close to me and my family. And in many ways, a lot of them feel like family, and I've only known them for a little over a year. After that, I transitioned to running for the first time in over 30 years and applied to run with Team AFSP in the 2021 Boston Marathon. My brother and I grew up in Boston, and he always volunteered to work on Marathon Monday. It was always a special day for him. And so it felt like a really great way to honor his memory. And I completed it, and it was the most magical day ever, not just because of the experience, but I felt my brother with me and saw family and friends along the way who reminded me why I was doing this. And since then have run with Team AFSP in several additional races, one in Los Angeles, the LA Marathon Charity Challenge, as well as the Chicago Marathon several weeks ago. My hope is to support AFSP in every state so I can share a little piece of my brother around the country.
That is so beautiful, Jen. Thank you for sharing that. I wonder if we might go, and there are so many little things you mentioned that I think might weave into the rest of our conversation. For now, let's go over to Phil. And Phil, if you could share about your own loss experience with us, that would be great.
Yes. My name is Phil Tyler. First of all, thank you, Brett and AFSP, for having me here. I want to send my sympathy and my empathy to panelists here, both Bridget and Jen and Brett, for your loss. I lost my son, Devin, to suicide in 2017. And Devin was a wonderful young man, 22 years old at the time. And his loss has really inspired me as a father, as a man, as a Black man, to become more involved in this process. I am not a runner like my good friend Jen, but I am in this marathon that we are all in, and that is to prevent suicide. I know it's a long race. I'm willing to run it alongside of wonderful people like yourselves. And I think this opportunity presents an opportunity for us to share a little bit about our loss and hopefully empower others to share about their loss as well. I am a volunteer with AFSP, and I'm also a board member with AFSP Washington. And I say that to say that I became those things as a result of my loss. It inspired me to connect with others that are doing this work. So that is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that's why I'm here today to share my story. Thank you, Brett.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. I think just for people who, if you're watching this today and you are a new survivor of suicide loss, you might not even know that expression. You may just feel like you're someone who has lost someone to suicide. I'm hoping that it will be helpful for you, because you might feel very alone in this, to hear other people's experiences and the things that we've all gone through and worked through, and we've had more time with it than you have. So let's move over to Bridget now and hear what her connection to the cause is.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brett. And thank you to your team. We really appreciate that. And to both Jen and to Phil, you both know how deeply we connect with you and connect with your loss. And so I'm really glad to be a part of a panel like this where we can talk about the healing process. My nephew, Spencer, he's no longer with us. His spirit is with us every day. But our loss, we feel him all the time, and we love him deeply. And it's through this experience that I had with the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention that we learned language around how to speak about this and how to heal and how to move forward, not only individually, but as a family, and then to help others. It was interesting that when we got the news about Spencer, our organization that my husband and I put together, we work with a lot of young people, young adults. And it just so happened that we decided that year to focus on mental health. And when this occurred, we knew we have to do more. We have to learn more. We have to research, because we wanted the information to be authentic. We wanted it to be true. We wanted to be able to touch lives and to heal others. So I can't even explain what the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention has been for our family, for our organization, the Performing Arts Conservatory. Those kids wrote a full musical about suicide awareness and prevention because of their care for other young people within our community. And it seems that it has touched lives, particularly those in the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, because they came alongside and taught us how to use the appropriate language, how to care, how to heal, how to help others heal. And so we're so grateful for what you've done and for what you're doing. And I have to say that, just like Phil, since this occurred, we've been a part of all the walks. Our kids are a part of the walks in our organization. We connect ourselves with this service because we see it as a life service today, and we've learned so much. And so I pray that we can be a part of that healing process. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for being here. Let's just get right into it, because I want to explore kind of at first the things that we all kind of went through initially after we experienced our loss. So the first thing I want to talk about is emotions. There are a lot of sort of common emotions that people feel when they lose someone to suicide. The emotions may be happening simultaneously. They may even seem to conflict with each other. They might change over time. And in families or groups of friends, different people might be feeling different things. So I'm just going to open this up to the group, and I'll share a little myself, maybe, but I want to start with you all. What kind of emotions did you feel in those early moments?
Wow. Well, this is Phil, Brett, and I will tell you, I ran the gambit of emotions, and even joining today, I'm emotional, and it's okay, because what I've learned through those emotions is that it's okay. So I initially obviously was shocked, like any other parent, and when I say shocked, I mean a full body shock, not just the news, but the feeling that overwhelmed my body. I was angry. I was angry at my faith. I was angry at those around me. I was angry at the first responders, strangely enough, for keeping me away. I was feeling guilt, like any other parent would in a loss. I had the motives of missed opportunity, the could have, would have, should have, just running through my head all day long. When I first had it, I was confused. I was sad. And here's what's unique about this situation, Brett. I was lonely. I was surrounded by tens of people on that day. And as the month drew out, by hundreds of people, but I was lonely. And I was lonely until November 19th, until I went to my first International Survivors Loss Day. And then I understood that I wasn't alone. And it was powerful. And I hope that that's a powerful message that can be relayed today.
Yeah, that is so powerful when you go to one of these events. We can say that you're not alone, and we can name statistics of how many people have been affected by suicide each year. It's a leading cause of death. But to actually be with a group of people from your community is really powerful. And I hope for those watching this right now, they can sort of feel that just a little bit from us. What about the rest of you? Different emotions?
Similar to Phil, the shock, the anger, the what ifs and the whys kept me up at night. When I think back to the early years, a lot of it was emptiness. I was trying so hard not to feel all of these emotions. And I was damaging myself and my relationships and my family by trying to just stuff them down in any way possible. And I think that increased the feelings of isolation, because not only did I feel lonely and separate from everyone who had kind of moved on after all of the services were over, but I was like purposely isolating myself. And it wasn't until I started to connect with other survivors that I realized that everything that I was experiencing wasn't unique. That these families, while every death is unique, there were a lot of commonalities in how we felt and the things that kept us up at night. And it wasn't until I started really allowing myself to feel all of those emotions that I was even able to even start down a path of healing.
Thanks for sharing that.
I was thinking, Brett, as both were talking, the initial feeling of why couldn't I be there for my nephew? I remember the day before like it was yesterday, and thinking how what didn't I say as an aunt? What was I there? Did I listen when he came to the house? You know, we were a close family. Thinking about Thanksgiving, we were always together every Thanksgiving. All the kids grew up, and I kept thinking, he was just here. I just held him, or what did I miss? You know, what could I have said? What could I have probed? Could I have probed deeper or something? How could I have helped my nephew in a different way? And I think Phil said it really well. The pain was it was full body. It was just, what's going on. I remember during the time of the gathering, there were people that came around that really undergirded the family, letting us know, hey, we're here for you. Talk to us. We want to listen. And they were other individuals who were survivors, who were lost survivors. And that was the moment I felt like, I know for me personally, that I could breathe. It was like, okay, I can release. I can breathe, because that's what the pain felt like. It was like almost stifling. So yeah, a lot of emotions, but the healing was coming through people who had experienced it, letting us know you're normal. You're normal,
Yeah, I'm glad you put it that way, because I think that's the main point that I want to get across to anyone watching. It's not like some emotions are reasonable and normal. Whatever emotions you're feeling are okay, and you deserve support for it, just as your loved one deserves support. I remember I have a slightly different perspective, because I was very lucky, all things being very, very relative, with my mom. I had watched her struggle for such a long time, and I was like her person, her main person. And it was exhausting, and I loved her so much, and I would have done anything for her. And it sounds maybe horrible to say, but the moment when she passed away, it was like my battery was out. And so I almost felt guilt over, should I be crying more? Should I be, I just felt completely depleted in that moment. And I think I was kind of in shock a little bit too, even though on some level it kind of could have been expected, because we all knew my mom was struggling, but it's complicated. And to the point of Phil's comment about full body shock, I remember for the next several months, even when I wasn't feeling emotional or thinking emotionally about it, I would just be lying on the couch or something, and I would suddenly, it was like a physical sensation of just like tears for like 15 seconds, just like my body racked with it, and then it would go away. Didn't even feel any emotion. I was just still kind of obviously processing on a very deep level, and luckily enough, I had support, and things were okay. But anything you're experiencing after a suicide loss, I think, is reasonable and okay. And guilt is often one of those things. And I know it's not as simple as saying don't feel guilty, but I want to say that. I want to say that whatever you're experiencing, it's okay. And healing isn't a linear path. You go back and forth. It changes over the years. So in the film we just watched, we saw that different people had different coping strategies or things that helped them. There was running, there was spirituality, there was support groups or therapy, just talking about the loss with other people. So I want to ask each of you, what are some of the things that have been helpful for you, both in those early moments and then as time went on after your loss?
You know, Brett, I thought, and it was, I was going to say it a different way, but I was going to initially say, I thought my faith was going to be the support that I needed. And what me, my family members, what we found is that there was a message that we were sending that wasn't always a truthful message through the church. And this is, please understand, this is not a put down of the church. I love that I'm a part of the church. I love my faith. However, what I learned was what you don't know, you don't speak accurately about. And so sometimes where I turned, it didn't always help. And, you know, I was able to turn to different mechanisms. And what I mean by that is, like I said earlier, when the kids started writing the musical, we had psychologists, we had therapists that came in, the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, they came in. All of these other folks came in giving me these messages of hope. And I thought, oh, wow, what an opportunity to be able to gather this information to help my community and my faith community. Because where I turned, personally, I found it, right? By doing my own reading, by praying myself. But I found that my messages of hope came through these other mechanisms. And I'm grateful, you know, for, like I said, the therapists, psychologists, all the folks that worked with us. I'm grateful for American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. And I'm grateful of those that were in the faith that understood, but I discovered that many didn't. And I mean, I can talk about that later because that became a thing. It was like, uh-oh, there's a message that we need to send so that we can help others heal. So I'm going to be quiet here so my other colleagues can.
I want to really quickly loop back though on something you were talking about, Bridget, because I think this is an interesting aspect of your story. So you were working with kids and they happened to be doing a play about mental health.
Yes. Yes.
And that was when you had your loss.
And it happened right during the time of them putting their thoughts together and, you know, working out the scenes. And I discovered a lot was going on with them in their own schools and some thoughts that they were having. And it was like, wait a minute, what's happening? I didn't even know anything about it. Brett, I knew nothing up until that point. And how much and how fast we learned was definitely needed. Let me tell you that. It was needed because our goal is saving lives. And our goal was to save lives of not only those kids, but their friends and their parents so it was needed. It was needed at that particular time. Who knew we choose this subject? The kids choose the topics. We choose a topic, and it was so prevalent and really needed at that time.
That sounds like it was some nice timing for you.
Yeah.
With how that worked out. Phil, Jen, what about you? What kind of stuff? I thought it was interesting how Bridget said she had expectations about what would be helpful for her, but it wasn't, and she had to get support in other ways. How does that strike you?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying this to Bridget. Amen, my sister. Because, you know, I dove into my faith after being angry at my faith for taking my son at 22. But I had to learn, some really good coping strategies. And when I say, Brett, I had to learn, I was 50 years old when I lost my son. And you would have thought that a military veteran, a father of 3, would have known good, healthy coping skills. I didn't. So I had to learn those quickly as a result of that. And I learned that by staying in touch with those that cared about Phil and his family frequently was really good for me. Even if that being in touch was simply listening to me cry on their shoulder. And that was very important. I had to learn, quickly to not rush this grief. I think you spoke to it, Brett, that it's not linear, right? It's an ongoing process. To this day, I'm still recovering. But I have ups and downs, fits and starts, and but I control that grief narrative. And it takes time, and I've learned to give myself some grace and to expect those setbacks. Thanksgiving is coming up, and that was the last time Devin and I were together. We burnt the sweet potatoes, by the way, on that Thanksgiving dinner. So I have a positive image about that. But I know it'll be a setback for me when that anniversary comes up, like birthdays and these kind of things. So I had to learn to accept those setbacks, even though I'm moving along in my grief journey. And then, I really had to understand and know when to seek professional help. I have seen a counselor from time to time. And one of the things that she told me, and bless her heart for this, she asked me, Phil, what would it be if you just allowed yourself to be a hot chocolate mess? And I said, I have no idea, because I've never done that. Because I've always wore the mask. I've always suppressed my emotions. But I've learned since then that a good coping skill was not to do those things. So it's really helped me.
Allow yourself to be a mess, I think, is something we can all benefit from. And just know there are times where, much as we want to be whatever our perception of strong is, you need to kind of lean into the reality of how you're feeling and what you're capable of. And that might be something that you need to go through to get to the other side of that. But I love the way you put it. Jen, any thoughts from you? Were there any emotions that maybe surprised you or seemed to conflict with each other? Or what was your experience like in those early days?
I think hearing Philip talk about the mask, my whole life, my brother was born 4 months early in the 70s when micro-preemies weren't even a thing. And I took my role as his protector very seriously. He was bullied a lot when we were kids, but quickly I got a reputation as being Teddy's sister. And you knew you didn't want to mess with Teddy or you'd mess with Teddy's sister. And so the guilt around not being able to protect him when he needed it most really just rocked me to my core. And I still struggle with it now, but that idea of giving that like strong, tough front and being strong for my parents and being strong for my kids and just being strong was probably the most detrimental thing I could have done. And I was lucky that I had so many relationships, because relationships are what got me through it. And I was surprised by people who I expected. I had that expectation they would be there, who just disappeared because they weren't comfortable with the topic of suicide. And those who I hadn't seen since 1987, she sent me a 4-page handwritten letter expressing, her emotions around my brother's death and sharing her experience with suicide loss. And that was really one of the most touching things, like during those early days. And I realized that relationships were so important. And that's really what has fueled me and has given me the most hope, are the relationships I've made with other loss survivors.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I most remember, I remember it was hard to get out of the apartment and to even just go and I remember my wife and I went to have dinner somewhere. It was like a month later or something, and that felt like a big moment. I remember a good friend of mine just meeting me at the diner near where I live. And at a certain point, when we were talking about this, he just put his hand on my hand, and it was like, take that, toxic masculinity. It was a great moment. And anyway, but this leads into my next question, actually, which is that one of the ways we get support is through other people and what they can do. But I think, Jen, you hit on something that's really important, which is that I think that most of the time people do want to be supportive and help, but they may literally do nothing because they're worried that they're going to say or do the wrong thing. So in a way, it shouldn't be on the person who's just lost someone to give everyone else directions. But practically speaking, looking back, I wonder if any of you have thoughts on what it is you really specifically needed. Like if anyone's watching right now who wants to be good in terms of supporting someone else, maybe that's why they're watching.
I think a big piece of it is people don't know what to say. And I have shared a lot in my social media blogs and things like that. Like, you don't need to have the right words. There are no right words. There's nothing you can say that's going to fix it, but just let somebody know you're there. I had a friend just show up with a cup of coffee. She drove an hour just to bring me a cup of coffee. Like little gestures like that. And you don't have to do actual gestures, but just say, hey, I'm thinking of you. Like, this is terrible. And you don't need to know the right words. I think that that's really an important thing, because just letting someone know you're there is really what they need in that moment.
Yeah, I think knowing that you're there and just compassion, no judgment. I mean, that's the last thing we need at that time as a survivor. Someone, asking a question like, why didn't you see that coming? Or if I don't even want to get into some of the stuff that people said.
Get into it.
It was like, what are you saying? Did he not have enough faith? Do you not have enough faith? Well, that was oh God. Sometimes when I think of it, it's so hurtful. It's hurtful because really all you need to do, like Jen just said, is just care. And if my mom used to say to me all the time, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. If you don't have the words, what I found, and I found it to be helpful for both my brother and sister. And when I say literally every day, we would just go and sit with them. We would just be there. We didn't ask anything of them. We didn't condemn them. We just sat with them. And like you were saying, your friend just put his hand on your heart, on your hand. Sometimes that's all you need, and help to walk with them through it. Because you're right, Jen, what words do you say? What we're hurting, and at any moment we're going to cry. So just care. That's all we want, is a heart that cares.
And to your point, Bridget, I won't go into all of the horrible things that people come to you with questions. They want to know the answers that we probably want to know ourselves. And in the early days, I didn't have the words or even, I think, the emotional range to even respond. But now when I get those types of questions, I just put it back and say, do you really want me to relive the worst day of my entire life?
Exactly.
And that usually they think, because they weren't realizing the impact that it had. And I think that that's important for people to know, as you're, supporting a suicide loss survivor, is you don't need to know things that are going to re-traumatize somebody over and over and over. And it's just be there.
Just be there. Just be quiet. Just be there. Yes.
Yeah. I would echo everything that both Bridget and Jen said. I would add this to your point, Brett, you spoke about earlier. Don't try and be strong for me. What I need you to be for me is weak, not from the sense of the adjective weak, but from the sense of the acronym WEAK, W-E-A-K, willing to express adult kindness. And when you do that for me, I want you to do it with genuineness, right? And I want you to do it with consistency, because we know how this works. We have a situation, we get the sad faces, the prayer symbols, whatever emojis they send you online. We get the card at the memorial. We get the hug at the service. Then a week later, those drop off. And then a month later, those drop off. What I want is consistency. I want you to check in on me from time to time. That way I know that your true feelings for Phil and his family are real. And I want you to be able to express that adult kindness. If you hug me and cry, I'm gonna cry along with you. That's okay. That is okay. Be consistent in your care for me. And you have a skill set. And this is to everyone watching and listening. Whatever your skill set is, use that. Maybe you cook well. Maybe you're great at walking the dogs. We just had 6 inches of snow. Maybe you got a snowblower and feel like Brett can't get up off that couch because I'm going through some things. But if you hit that sidewalk and driveway for me, Lord have mercy, I'm gonna know that you love me.
Right.
Do something, show kindness, and be consistent with it.
You know, Phil, I remember during that time, this sounds so goofy now, but I remember all I wanted to do was clean my sister's bathroom. I thought, you know, there are a lot of people coming in and out of this house, and I want to make sure her bathroom stays clean. And I want to make sure, because we're all going through, we're like little robots. And so what can we do? We're trying to exert energy in some kind of way. And you're right. It was like, can I go get some food? Can I cook? Can I do that? You know, and today, now we're, you know, several years into this, we hear them saying, do you know the thing that mattered the most to me is that this person came by every day. They started calling us babysitters, whatever, but you know, they came by every day. They always brought food. They would just let us talk. And I never will forget the day when Spencer's dad, my brother, said, you know what? Robert and Bridget just let us talk and didn't judge us and didn't judge my son. We want to hear your heart. And I think that's what Jen is saying. I just want let me express my heart and be compassionate and caring with my heart because it hurts. Yeah.
That is so beautifully put. And believe it or not, we only have a few minutes left, which I think has something to do with daylight savings time. I'm not sure how that's possible because I feel like we just started talking. But I want to talk about, I want to move forward a little bit. So some years have gone by. You've all processed your loss more than you did, obviously, in the very early stages. I want to talk about maybe whether closure, what does that concept mean to you, whether it's possible? And I'll combine that with one other question, which is, if you could go back in time and tell yourself something during those early moments that you understand now more about suicide loss, what would you say to yourself?
Wow, let me start with the second question first, Brett, because that really hit me right there. What I would tell myself and anyone that goes through the experience that we have all been through, those that are listening and watching today, is whatever emotions you go through, you're not being difficult. Whatever sensations you're feeling, you're not being an inconvenience. Whatever shock or guilt or sensations, you owe no one an apology for that. And then I would say to myself in the past, it's okay to struggle. I'm human. We're all human. We all have that range of emotions, and we all don't get it right. To your first question, closure. Wow. My mother is a shaman in Austin, Texas, and she speaks of this term Sankofa, and it's essentially an African term. And it simply means it's the wisdom that we learn from the past, which ensures a successful or strong future. Closure for me is tough because we believe that a story has to have a beginning and an end. And oftentimes we don't get that with suicide loss. But here's what's important. we have to look back because it helps us understand the depth of pain that our loved one was in. But we can't stay in the past because we'll never get closure in the past. So we have to look at that past and then write our own ending to the story. And the ending to my story, my closure, is that I get to join with a wonderful organization as AFSP. I get to share my story on days like this with wonderful human beings like Bridget and Jen. And that is the fairy tale ending to my grief story, helping others along their grief journey. Is it closure? It may not be, but I'll end my chapter the way I feel best that helps me to move forward.
I think when that word closure, when you said that, Brett, that's a hard word for me because I feel like I'm not going to get closure. Then you got Phil who comes along and gives us a whole nother definition of this. And I'm like, oh man, because after all of this occurred, I realized that I can do something. I can be a part of the process to help other families. And we just see ourselves now as servants. How do we serve others? And listening to this new definition of closure, I'm like, oh, I guess we are still writing this story because we're still on this journey and we're working with people and we're learning how to better talk to people about about suicide and suicide prevention. And we are better equipped today than I was, like you said, at the beginning. At the beginning, Brett, I wasn't equipped at all. I didn't know, I knew nothing. I didn't understand it. Today, what I would tell that person, you're going to grow and you're going to grow in ways that's going to help you serve others. And that's where I am today.
What about you, Jen?
It's interesting, the word close. I can't put my arms around that. And I think part of it goes to your second question of what would you tell yourself? Because like I said, my brother and I were so close and I took my role as his protector so seriously. Growing up, people would just call us Jennifer and Teddy like it was one word. So my whole life has been as half of a whole. And now how do I live without that? And for a long time, I felt like there would never be closure. And now I think of it a little differently. It's how do I carry that? Because as long as I am still here, I feel like my brother's memory is still alive. And I see my brother in all three of my kids in different ways. And sometimes even when I yell at my youngest, who is so much like his uncle, I accidentally call him Teddy. And that brings me joy. When I'm helping other people, I feel like I'm sharing my brother's heart with the world. Growing up, I was the tough one. I was the one who was just tough and ready to fight anyone. And my brother was kind and gentle. And in my mind, he was always the good one. So how do you reconcile being the one who stays behind? And so I would like to show myself more kindness, and I'm working on that. And my therapist always says, even if your belief that he was the good one and he should be here, why does that mean you shouldn't? And that has been hard for me to process. And I've thought a lot about it. And I feel like my purpose is to continue his goodness and bring his kindness to the world. And even if I can just help one person, then I will have made a difference. I may not have been able to protect Teddy when he needed it the most, but Teddy's helping me protect somebody else.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that, Jen, and thanks to both of you. I'll just quickly say, so much of what you all just said really resonated for me. I'll say for me, closure, and it depends how you're defining it too, I guess. And it may be about defining it more for yourself and not for the person you've lost, because that you can never fully know, obviously. But I think one thing that helped me was, especially once I started working at AFSP, is understanding that suicide isn't some mysterious existential poetic dilemma that there's nothing we can do about. It's a health crisis. There's something going on with that person's health, and we know things that we can do to help prevent suicide. That's where all the research comes in. And the other thing I'll say is that every once in a while, I kind of feel my mom's spirit in me. And during my better moments, occasionally I'll be reminded of her a little bit in the way I say something or do something. And it usually involves kindness. All right, I feel like we could continue on with this for another 3 hours. But sadly, we're about out of time. I want to thank you for being here with us. Just also want to say that I hope this has been helpful for people watching. I want to encourage all of you watching to consider connecting with your local AFSP chapter, because there are people in your own community with some connection to this cause who you don't need to explain things to. They're just going to get it because they've been there. And so that's available to you. I specifically also want to point out an amazing program run by our loss and healing team, which is called the Healing Conversations Program. We'll stick a link in there below this for that program. And basically it's people who are themselves suicide loss survivors who've been trained to have a conversation with someone who's lost someone and provide them with some understanding and some resources in their community. Healing Conversations is great. Also, my one other plug is that there's a real convo guide that we did about after a suicide loss. So I think that might be helpful to find underneath this discussion. But mainly, I want to just say thank you so much once again to our panelists, Jen, Phil, and Bridget. Thank you so much for sharing so freely of yourselves. Thanks to the loss and healing team from AFSP and mostly everyone who's tuned in today. You are not alone in this experience. No one has to be. Please share this link and these resources with your friends and loved ones. You never know who could use it. So I'll just say take care, everyone. Be well. Thanks.